for those that don't know, my name is Yendor Felgate. With Lorato, we run a business called the Being Human Group. We're a Gallup's strategic licensee for Africa, and we certify Gallup coaches across the continent. And I'm delighted to say that Kathrine is one of our alumni who's doing some fantastic work using Clifton Strengths in her consulting and coaching business. And part of that is what we're going to connect with today.
My name is Lorato, and welcome back to the BHG Clifton Strengths series. Today with me, I have Yendor Felgate and Kathrine Bekker, two Gallup Global Strengths Coaches. Today, we will be having a conversation around Clifton Strengths and the different tools that can help impact and maximize your coaching journey.
Let's start with you. Kathrine, perhaps you want to just introduce yourself and then I'll loop back to me, but talk to us a little bit about who you are and how you got involved with Clifton Strengths and why you became a coach.
Okay, so I have a golden thread that really has looped through my career. If I start back, I started in human resources in a corporate organization in Durban, and that really did set the foundation for wanting to be in people development. So yeah, and I looked at traditional IR and labor relations side of the human aspect, and I felt that I wanted to be in the let's grow, let's develop side of things. And so my coaching journey goes back, gosh, lots of years, 20 something odd. And so during the course of those years, I've worked for corporate and then left and went on my own, worked for small consulting firms. But the constant has always been wanting to unlock what is our potential. And obviously, that was before discovering strengths and then realizing, gosh, there's a whole tool there that focuses on what we're good at, which I find really exciting.
And Kathrine, your experience as a coach is exactly, I think, the experience of many of the Gallup coaches, and myself included. I started also off in HR, and I got to the point where I could no longer really work in that hardwiring space anymore, and I think sort of ended up where I think we make the best impact is working with great people to help them to develop to be the best versions of themselves. And to that end, that sort of positive approach to development, not this let's worry about what you don't have, but let's worry about what you do have. I think it's just such a powerful rationale for us, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, my first coaching course that I did was in 2011. So I feel like, I've been coaching for quite some time, but I really, really do find that, and I fast tracked because I haven't been, I think it's been a year that I've really been coaching with the Clifton Strengths methodology. And I wish I had known it earlier, because it really is so powerful.
No, I know, for us to start as a coach to work with people, starting with who they are, who their authentic selves is, and the idea that they are valuable, I think it's just such a powerful beginning for a coaching conversation. I'm sure you found the same.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, my daughters actually did it when they were in grade 9,
right,
and wanting to choose their subjects for grade 10 and looking at where their interests and their talents, natural talents lie. And I thought, gosh, what a great way of actually looking at how to choose your degree or how to choose your subjects. So we've been kind of immersed in strengths. My daughters are out of school for at least 5 something plus years, so it's been a journey.
Kathrine, but I'm always curious. I mean, talk to us a little bit about your top 5, if you can. I don't want to put you on the spot, but what are your top 5, and what really resonates, or what stood out for you when you first read your report?
Okay, no, I do know them. They really are top of mind, front and center. Because and it's interesting because when I start doing the coaching with someone in their top 5 and they have such an aha moment, I go, gosh, it really makes sense why I've chosen the different roles in my life. So I have input as my number 1, arranger, connectedness, strategic, and activator. So
I have to say I've had recent experience with your input, and certainly understand how that strength works in terms of collating information. I know every time you reach out to me, it's about where is something is in my I've discovered, right? That's pretty cool. So you talked about your input and your ranger. I mean, we often talk about love, appreciate, and frustrate. I mean, is there one strength that you fall in love with that is your go-to, or?
It's probably my strategic, and I think it's the one that I have used to course correct without realizing that I've been course correcting. And if you ask my family, they'll honestly say that's the one part that probably frustrates them, whilst they love it and appreciate it. They're like, Mom, do we really constantly have to be changing direction? Could we just stay in one kind of direction for a short while? So I find it my genius and my magic, but I realize that when I'm overplaying that strength, it can potentially frustrate those around me.
Yeah, and you put your finger on something I think is quite important. People think strengths is always a little bit around, it always goes well, but it doesn't. And sometimes we don't use our strengths appropriately, and that can create a little bit of a hindrance for us. Because I think people are really hardwired to worrying about what they're not good at. And in our world, it's a little bit about, are we using our strengths in the correct way, I suppose, is the way to reframe that I think becomes then so powerful. And out of interest, is there a strength that you have that frustrates you and others? I know you slightly talked about strategic, but is there another example?
Well, it might be the activator, to be honest, because I am a starter, and yes, I know that even in the teams that I'm working with, for the achievers that balance the activators, those are the achievers that come along and get the stuff done that the activators start. So again, I have started many projects, and I know I'm a catalyst for those, and I embrace that part of it, but I know that again, if I use my daughters as an example, they'll be like, "Gosh, do you really have to start another project? Do we not have enough on the go?" Hopefully, I have some balance with the strategic thinking in the top half, the connectedness, trying to still kind of remain grounded in a way, to the relationships. And then getting stuff done. Yeah, and to that point, I had to actually acknowledge that perhaps last year I took on too many projects. So I have had to really evaluate that and look hard at it and say, okay, let me focus on my coaching consultancy, because I had opened a wellness space, and I've had to acknowledge that perhaps somebody else needs to take over that wellness space, and it doesn't need to be me.
Yeah, talk to us through that decision, because I think it's not an easy one. So, how did your strengths play into that, and what were your considerations?
So it's a good conversation, and in fact, there's another strengths coach who has also an alumni from BHG who is really a very good sounding board for me. So if I may mention her name, I do a soundboard of her a lot. But Kathy Tucker helped me through that actually in December, and she said, "Kath, I don't think you're playing to your strategic enough. You're potentially focusing too much on a ranger who can juggle multiple things and start amazing projects, but is that really the right course that you should be taking?" And so it was a really powerful conversation that unlocked for me that I wasn't tapping into the strategic enough and going, okay, let's go.
Are there any strengths that others have that sometimes you feel overwhelmed with?
So maximizer, interestingly, although I have it in my 15, maximizer, it can be and command potentially, whilst I really appreciate the very direct, let's cut through the noise and cut through the chaos. I think it also depends on the how that it's delivered.
100%. Yeah, again, but that's all strengths, isn't it? I mean, harmony and empathy can be quite destructive if we're not mindful of the way that we use it. So strengths can be both, very powerful, but also be a big hindrance if we don't use them correctly. And I think, Kathrine, what you alert us to is, so you've talked about balance, which I think is the combination of your strengths. So powerful. It's talking about the volume of your strengths. In other words, let's get the volume right for the people that you're working with. And you may be the most enthusiastic activator in the room, but if nobody else is buying it, you need to be mindful of that. And I think you're talking a little bit also then about the great conversations we can have between different strengths or different strengths that people have. And you talked a little bit about trust. We've talked, I think by implication, we're thinking about things like, what does it mean to be honest? What does it mean to have integrity as who you are in an authentic way? And how do you contribute and show up in teams in a way that makes sense, right? I mean, these are all great questions. And I have to say, if you want to talk about our work outside of certification, 90% of our work is in the space that you're exactly mentioning, is the power of strength-based conversations to help and recognize people's contribution, right?
Yeah, and I mean, look, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but it actually leads quite nicely into how I've started to use the tools. So, you unlock it for an individual first. Obviously, for me, it was a huge unlocking and understanding myself, and then translating that into how we can unlock it for others. And then when you get the teams together and they start to realize okay, so that's why somebody needs time to think in a meeting. It's not that they're being quiet. It's actually that they need to process the information, because, people sort of make assumptions about why someone isn't contributing to a conversation, but they're coming from a data and facts and need to actually go back and verify some of the facts before weighing in on something. And so that unlocking for me has been so exciting when you see the lights go on for teams and going, oh, okay, so it's not that you're being difficult or you're being quiet or whatever the presuppositions we have about each other, and it's suspending that judgment and going, okay, so let me understand you from a strengths context, and then it just unlocks very different conversations.
Absolutely. Before we get to the tools, though, I was just a bit curious, given sort of the depth of our conversation here, Kathrine, why is it important for people that are interested in getting the best out of the report and coaching others to be certified? You've been through the certification process. Why was it important for you?
Well, firstly, it's credibility. So that for me, I can stand tall and say, okay, so I've been through the certification. It's backed globally by lots of research, by lots of resources. I feel that credibility lends weight to who I am and to who I represent. And so yeah, I mean, I think that that's really important, especially for organizations who are looking for coaches. There are obviously many other federations that are also accrediting people, but I would say make sure that whoever you are enlisting as a coach has got their certification. But it helped me to understand. And in fact, I mean, it's interesting once you start applying the theory, because we had the very intense process, and it's only then when those nuggets that you shared in the certification started to become real, when I started to apply them.
I think just to build on what you're saying, for us, it's a little bit about if you really want to be deep in the strength world and be a great, credible strength coach, understanding strengths is really important. Going way beyond just the report if you are to help others, and making sure that we understand what the 34 strengths are really about and how to use them properly, I think is probably our main criteria.
Yeah, and it certainly is very intensive, and it delivers on that.
Yeah. What I always love about the certification is just how intentional and practical it is. People come into the course perhaps never having coached before, come out of the course and they're on their journey. They've started, right? Well, this segue, the Clifton Strength Assessment.
I must say, I find it very, very powerful to use the top 5 or the unlocking of the top 5 first. And I usually recommend that we don't unlock the full 34 at the first stage, because again, it's intuitive to who we are. It is our signature strength. And I often say to people, it's who you are when you close your eyes, or who your family will describe you as, or the people who know you the best. So yeah, and I feel that that is pretty much who we are, front and center. So I spend a good hour on the first session on unlocking who you are in context of your top 5, and then allow some time to assimilate that and to kind of put that into practice before unlocking the rest. In that first conversation, I always say to people to look at their report and highlight the phrases that stand out, that really describe them, because then that is the naming it and the claiming it and kind of really taking ownership. Okay, yeah, this is really who I am.
Absolutely right. I just want to build on that. I mean, what I get quite excited about top 5 is, remember, your top 5 is your most dominant, your most powerful strengths, right? The ones that you probably use every single day, whether you realize it or not. So in my terminology, when I work with Gen Z, they're your cool ones, right? So I like the top 5. And the other thing I like about it is it's unique to you, right? So the descriptor is not cut and paste. You don't get a color, a number, or a spirit animal. These are, the interesting combinations of strengths. I also love in the report itself, it gives you great suggestions about how to apply or use a strength as well. I find those very valuable.
Yeah, and that's why, again, for people, I always say this is process work. It is not a tick box exercise, because if you skip past that, you're not getting the real benefit of the depth, and so, yeah, again, because I think from a kind of organizational design development background, fits well with strength, and it just goes, hey, this is process work. We cannot going to just, and it's for life, actually. It's just another layer of the onion and another layer of the onion as we get deeper into understanding how we show up, and how that your strategic or my strategic would show up very differently because of the other combinations that we have.
Yeah, and our experience and how we've developed it. It is unique, like our fingerprint or our DNA to ourselves. And I think that's really what one of my clients, as you know, I've told the story before, he doesn't want to be a pink flamingo. And I think what he was attesting to that is that there's no cut and paste in a report. It truly resonates. And what I like about using the report, Kathrine, I don't know if you have the same experience, is 99% of the time people go, wow, that's cool. That's me. That resonates. Very seldom do people really have, very big differences. I don't know what your experience is like.
So that has been my 99.9% response, the odd outlier that we do get. And it was an interesting experience, because what transpired is that this person then realized they needed to do more reflection, because they were like, why am I not being able to own that? What is it in those top 5 that I'm not wanting to look at? So that was a whole nother conversation.
And a powerful one. Sometimes we see on our strength report something we've never really thought about ourselves. And that if it is new, then we want people to spend time there going, right, is that really me? I often find when people have those questions, it leads to great coaching and breakthroughs, because suddenly somebody goes, well, I've always thought I was strategic, but I can now see that something else is showing up. So we have a Clifton Strength for Manager report, and a Clifton Strength for Leaders report, and a Clifton Strength for Sales report. So they are what we call role-based strength reports. In other words, if we take your top 5, or in the case of the report, the top 10, it will then start to say, how can I use or posed this question: how can I use my top 10 strengths to be a better manager or a better leader or a better salesperson? And we just found that that's quite valuable, because sometimes, and I know, Kathrine, in your work too, is that you would have a team of managers, right? So how do we understand the role of a manager, and how do we understand a management team without sort of a little bit more of a reflection or connection between strengths and the role itself? And so we love that application, and I think it gives people, an additional benefit, not just knowing my strengths, but understanding how my strengths could show up, to help me for that role. It links it much more directly, and I think we've seen some huge benefits with that. In terms of the Being Human group, we provide the certification, but we also provide our coaches with some great support around some additional tools. So every time you're engaged with either individual coaching or team coaching or leadership coaching, there is a set of tools that sit behind that we're able to support, and one of those examples is the Power of Two. Kathrine, out of interest, any other tools that you particularly like in the Cascade, what we call the Cascade pack?
Loretta always runs the name tent card report for me, which I find really breaks the ice when we're doing our team away sessions, because we'll put those up on the desks. And if people haven't shared, because I obviously encourage them all to download the Gallup app, but they don't always have time to do that before the session. So then there's quite a nice sort of ice breaking that happens when people walk around the room and look at the little tent cards, because it's visual, and obviously it's in color, so it becomes a real conversation starter even before the team session has started, before putting up the team grid, or even going into where do our differences lie, or where do our commonalities lie, where do the gaps lie. So the name tents have definitely been a good tool, and I've used it, I think, on every team session that I've run. I was recently in the same client's building, and it was quite nice to walk around the building and see them on people's desks or stuck up on their pin boards. Any
other tools that you found particularly powerful, Kathrine?
A combination of two. I've used the personal insights with a lot of success, and the being and doing, what I call it the being and doing, which is what do I bring, what do I do, and it breaks down each strength into a level that, again, it's a conversation starter, because I'll put that up as a PowerPoint slide, and then often hand it out as a handout, and then say, let's break into smaller groups once each person's had an opportunity to assimilate it, and then go, okay, so let's understand each other in terms of what I bring, what do I need, because then we can bring out the best in each other.
The tools are essentially to help you, but it's also a gift that keeps on giving, because you're able to iterate and loop back and use them really as anchor points to keep a team on track, right?
Yes, and especially when it takes practice to be operating from. In fact, there's such a great model that Kath shared with me yesterday. I mean, the model of communication with 3 C's, and we generally charge to the third one, which is, here's my message, this is what I want done, and this is how we're going to do it. So almost like the maximizers and the command coming through. And actually, we need to stop and go, I know that you're really doing a great job at the moment. So the first C of celebrate, and seeing the person and acknowledging them for their great strength, and then centering them and going, okay, so are we aligned? Are we on the same page before going to charge? And that's almost what I feel like this report allows us to loop back to, because we might have unlocked it and think, oh, yes, we've understood it. And yes, we've done the Power of Two. We're like, well, have we really gone to another layer and another depth of understanding, especially when we are in pressure times, and we now, you actually said it in the masterclass, which is so great. It's how do I take, not from what I want to get done with my strengths, but what's going to be best for the team in terms of unlocking what you need from me, as opposed to what I'm wanting. So I think that when you go to the next layer of the conversation, it's shifting it to, what do you need from me?
I love that. It's the tools help you to layer the conversation. Yeah, and that's where the insight and development and the multiplication, the multiplier effect happen. Looking to the future, where do you think your strengths coaching is going to go, and how do you think it's going to evolve?
I would love to do a rollout with the teams I've been working with at a senior level. They're wanting to take it into their next, they've taken it into their next layer of reporting line, and now it's about those D upper in their grading classification, taking it down to their teams, and it really becoming the language of their organization, because it's also driving their values and it's driving their strategic purpose. I mean, it really is the tool for all of that. So that's where I'm aiming. I'm hoping that, well, I have had a few requests from different teams who are wanting to kind of cascade it and integrate it into their team. So yeah, well, let's change South Africa one organization at a time. I mean, you're doing what you're doing on the mining and engineering side of it, and yeah, we'll have to capacitate. I think that's where I'd like to see it go.
So in our terminology, really what you're evolving to is helping organizations create a strength culture, making it part of the DNA of how we do business, right?
Yeah, and creating a strengths-based language, and then in that strengths-based leadership, which then obviously drives the culture. Yeah.
And that sort of takes us out of, I suppose, the sort of common sense view of a coach. You're not just a coaching of an individual or a leader or a team, but a coach of an organization, essentially.
Yes. Well, yes. So that's where I see myself. I'm going to put that out there.
Yeah, Kathrine, from our side, thank you very much for sharing some great insights. Loved the conversation. I'm always amazed that you bring two strength coaches together, and I think we could have a conversation for a day just on some of these aspects and so on. But I think the value of this for me is always about, we're always amazed by what our alumni do. So well done, and we wish you luck for that. And thank you for sharing. I'm going to hand over back to Lerato to see if there's any last thoughts from her side.
Thank you, Yendor. Thank you, Kathrine. Thank you both for having this conversation. It was extremely insightful. From my side, I don't have any other questions. If you do, please let me know. Find me on email, lerato@bhgroup.africa. And you can ask all the questions that you have. I am more than willing to assist if you would like more information about Clifton Strengths, the Clifton Strengths tools, or coaching. Then I am more than willing to give more information if on email or on as a phone call.
If you're across Africa, all it takes is a WhatsApp call.